Hanlon, you should be good to go.
Thank you. Good evening. This is the Development Operations Services Standing Committee of Council, the Town of Collingwood. I'd like to just start by advising Mayor Saunderson sends his apologies, but he will be a little late for the start of the meeting because he had a conflict this afternoon. The first item on the agenda is, of course, calling the meeting to order and reading the land acknowledgement as follows. Today, we acknowledge that Collingwood is located on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe people, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. The second item is the adoption of the agenda, and I'm going to read the motion to adopt the agenda. There's two changes. So that the content of the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee agenda for April 12, 2021 be adopted as amended. 1. Report and recommendation added. 6.3 P 2021-10 paid parking pilot project summary and recommendations. 2. Deputation management of health and safety issues at Sunset Point Park was withdrawn. So could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda as amended? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Hall. Councillor Jeffrey would second that. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Next item, declarations of pecuniary interest. If any member of this standing committee has an item of pecuniary interest they'd like to declare, now's the time. And of course, if you find yourself in a conflict as the meeting progresses, please announce it at that time. Next item is business arising from the previous meeting. Would any members have anything they'd like to raise as an item from a previous meeting? Seeing none, we're on to number 5 on the agenda, which is deputations. And the first item we have is legacy funds for redevelopment of the Collingwood terminals. Is the deputant here?
Yes, she is. Margaret Mooy is here, and I'll just, oh, she keeps moving around in the thing. Oh, there she is.
Okay. I don't know if I'm chopped off or not, but and is the audio coming through okay, Becky? Okay, thank you. I just get the whole view. There, we have everybody there. So Chair Hamlin and committee members, thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. This is one time that I am happy that council meetings are held virtually. You're probably aware that I'm the pedestrian victim in a recent car accident. So Zoom does allow me to take part, even though I have lost mobility because of numerous fractures. Today, I'm representing the Collingwood Terminal and Harbour Action Committee as a member of the Board of Directors. I also represent the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, the Collingwood branch, as well as having a strong connection with the Heritage Advisory Committee of Collingwood. I am addressing the committee because issues regarding heritage, Collingwood's heritage, are usually presented here. I'm also making my presentation before full council meets and possibly takes a ratification vote on decisions regarding the legacy funds. I'm very concerned that the Strategic Initiative Committee decided not to follow the staff recommendation of reserving $1 million of Collingwood's legacy fund for the development of the terminals. With one councillor being absent from casting a vote, there was a tie in the final count of votes, thereby defeating the motion to provide the $1 million for the development of the terminals from the legacy fund. I do realize that $3 million has been set aside for the extension of municipal services along Heritage Drive. And I appreciate that this is a huge investment to allow access and to support the amenities needed for public use in Millennium Park. This, however, does not address the terminal buildings and the need for redevelopment through adaptive reuse. It was stated in a previous meeting that the terminals are considered to be part of the waterfront master plan. Additional comments, though, explain that the $3 million plus the $885,000 shortfall for the waterfront plan does not address the actual footprint of the terminals for the redevelopment of the Collingwood grain elevators. And I think I've got all those amounts right. To give a sense of historical significance, the grain elevators were built in 1929 during the boom of the railway and shipping industries, when Collingwood was recognized as the Chicago of the North. Of course, when those industries were no longer viable, the grain elevators became redundant to their original use, and that happened in 1993. At the time of its closure, the terminals were owned by the Hamilton brothers and were later sold to the town in 1997. The terminals have sat dormant for more than 25 years, and they deserve our attention. As early as 1999, the town has been asking for public input and ideas for the use of the Collingwood terminals. Then, as it is now, the general consensus is that the terminals are valued as worth preserving and is definitely not a property for demolition. A petition of nearly 4,000 signatures supported preserving the terminals. When the town created the Heritage Conservation District in 2002, along with creating heritage guidelines that later became bylaws, the terminals were recognized as the most important industrial site in the district. Collingwood should be protecting this heritage building, not letting it be demolished by neglect. Returning to the committee's voting of how to allocate the 6.5 million portion of the legacy fund, I would argue that the additional amount of 1 million that Councillor Jeffrey suggested should be added to the already allocated 1 million in the reserve fund for the hospital is no longer viable. The extra million to make the ministry take notice that Collingwood is serious has been taken out of the equation. The latest announcement from Infrastructure Ontario has recently allocated 200 to 499 million for capital costs of building Collingwood's new hospital. So with that amount, I would say that we have been noticed. I also believe that Councillor McLeod's original motion of allocating $1 million to the redevelopment of the terminals and $2 million to the future multi-use recreation center was a fair and appropriate allocation. Relying on past campaign promises, Mayor Saunderson, Councillors Berman, Madigan, McLeod, Doherty, and Comey spoke in favor of prioritizing and preserving the terminals for adaptive reuse. Deputy Mayor Hall, as well as Councillor Madigan, supported the significance of the terminals and suggested that a steering committee be established. Councillor Hamlin supported a public-private partnership to repurpose the terminals. The terminals continue to be included on the Provincial Architectural Conservatory list of endangered heritage properties. Recently, the CAO listed items that are strategic enough for council to take an ongoing direct interest. In that list is the Collingwood Grain Terminal's RFP for redevelopment. The Collingwood Terminal and Harbour Action Group has made every effort to be part of a steering committee to assist in moving this project forward. To date, no committee has been formed. Our group has also been approached by private companies with plans to repurpose the terminals. One in particular would satisfy the Places to Grow Act by providing flexibility to capitalize on new economic and employment opportunities by making efficient use of land and infrastructure. I do know that we are in danger of losing some of these proposals to repurpose the terminals because some of the developers are feeling that the town is not open to discussions and will not entertain any proposals for another entire year. The town is losing money every year. It is costing the town more in maintenance and staff time than it receives from communication tower rentals on the roof. The town is obligated to maintain this historic icon as part of the town's own heritage bylaws. If the 1 million is reserved for the terminals from the legacy fund, then the process could move forward. This is also more in line with what the staff recommended to council. It is important that the green space outside the footprint of the actual building be preserved for the use of the community. The buried bladder of contaminated soil should not be disturbed. The area should be maintained for waterfront enjoyment and possible future use of Great Lake tour boats. There is great potential for both preserving the Collingwood terminals and Harbour, as well as the green space and waterfront for use by the citizens of Collingwood. The terminals could be adaptively reused without compromising the recreation area that surrounds it and is enjoyed by so many. I am asking you to reconsider the decision of not supporting this icon of Collingwood's history, but instead supporting our heritage by designating $1 million of the legacy fund to maintain the terminals and to finance any costs involved with proposals for their adaptive reuse. In essence, the legacy fund should be used to support this legacy of Collingwood's past. I thank you for listening, and hopefully you will consider some of the points that I have made tonight. There may be some other members of the committee who wish to speak at a different point in the committee meeting. I'm not sure. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Margaret. And I also want to say on behalf of the committee, it's so wonderful to be able to see you well enough to address us, and speedy recovery.
Thank you very much. Focusing on this takes my mind off some of the aches and pains that I'm suffering. So thank you again for listening tonight.
Thank you.
Okay.
Would anyone have any questions of Margaret? No. Okay, thank you very much then.
Okay, thank you.
So on to, yes, Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you. If I could ask through you to the CAO, just a point of clarification in terms of the process. The one comment that was made by Ms. Mooy was with regards to potential developers. Where, just so the public's aware, where are we at in terms of engagement with the development community as it relates to maybe going down that path?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through the chair. Oh, I see that Executive Director Culver's just turned on his video, and I'll let him take that. But I think I'm glad you asked this question, because I think that we should provide an update on this topic. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry, it's a new headset, so I was just checking. So we've been working at getting first step that was proposed to council was to do a built heritage assessment of the terrain terminals. This would help us to inform an RFP when we put one out to potential redevelopers to let them know sort of how it needed to be preserved, what needed to be preserved, what the heritage context and value was from the building in a formal way, so that it was sort of mathematically defined, for lack of a better phrase. I'll be honest, we've been struggling with getting that request for proposals, tenders out, simply because the nature of a built heritage assessment is a little bit different, and we've had to do a lot more research than we originally thought to ensure that we receive the right advice and the right vendor for that project. But we're very close. I think we're probably within a week or so of handing out that, putting that out to market and getting a consultant to come and help us with that process, which will be a public process. A big part of it is we expect at least 3 consultations with the community, including the Harbour Action Group, of course, to make sure that we have good input to help determine that consultative outcome. Following that, or actually in concurrence with that process underway, we're going to begin developing the RFP for the redevelopment. But first thing we need to do is get a P3 consultant to help us, because we don't have that expertise in-house. So we're going to begin that process as well. That project, I believe, and this is off the top of my head because I wasn't prepared, but I think we have about $300,000 in the budget for the entire process that was approved by council. So $300,000 to cover the acquisition of a P3 consultant, as well as all of the committee needs, the valuation committee needs for the P3 project or for the redevelopment project by the time we're completed that cycle, that process. So all in all, there's about $340,000, I believe, committed to this project between the built heritage assessment and the redevelopment program that we're seeking.
Any follow-up, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Just putting staff on the spot. Just so that I'm 100% clear, going back to the presentation of the funds, and again, in reference to what was presented tonight. So we did allocate monies in 2 forms or 2 pots to the infrastructure, the below grade infrastructure in terms of water and sewer to go out Heritage Drive. Does that specifically run right through to and including the base of the terminals, or would there be additional infrastructure and costs based on potentially what developer or what opportunity we choose, if there is one, to work with? And maybe just to clarify, I would assume that
through you, Chair, if I could.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, through you, Chair. So just to clarify from the Deputy Mayor, that your question is about the $3 million allocation from the Legacy Fund?
Yeah.
So to my mind, the $3 million from the Legacy Fund it certainly includes a mass servicing out to the terminal building with the purpose of whatever potential outcome may be yielded by the RFP process for a public-private partnership on that facility. And the scope of the $3 million has actually been designed around the idea of what might constitute maximum servicing. So what would be the maximum amount that a highest and best use might require from servicing under in that road. But that $3 million project has a lot more to do, in my mind, with actually developing Heritage Drive for the public of today. So as much as we have to have services under there for whatever might come as a result of the redevelopment of the terminals, the real value in the current term is about additional parking, formalized parking. A lot of the vision of the master plan had to do with how that roadway would be lifted and serviced, not from an infrastructure under the road perspective, but from a landscaping perspective and from an allocation of property to specific purposes like parking. So that's really where it's sort of a win-win when it comes to that $3 million. We also heard when we were entertaining approaches from various people who showed some interest in the terminal building that the town's skin in the game could be providing for that servicing, because that servicing would be an extraordinary expense versus what that building might entail. So this does provide some skin in the game when it comes to the redevelopment of the terminal. So I think it would be seen to be favorable against a redevelopment partner down the road.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this topic before we move on? Okay, thanks for that clarification, Dean. That was very helpful. Okay, so the next item are staff reports. And so the first one is PW 2021-05, Environmental Services 2020 End of Year Operations Summary. And I understand Manager McGinnity is here to present this evening. Hi, Heather.
Hello, good evening.
Hi.
Yes, so I know you've heard from our department a fair bit lately, but just wanting to give you a little bit of an update more on the capital side of our work. So sorry, just trying to fit my screen here. Don't know how I ended up in this view. Sorry about this. Here we go. Okay. So our end of year update, I wanted to focus it on capital since you've heard about operations updates in our performance reports. But as part of our due diligence under the Safe Drinking Water Act and we're wanting to make sure that council is aware of the status of both operations and capital works in the drinking water system, and including wastewater in this update to ensure it's a comprehensive update for your reference. So first slide, please. So the 2020 annual and summary report for water was received by council in February, and likewise the 2020 annual performance report for wastewater was received by council in March. So for both water and wastewater, I thought I'd give you an update on 2020 capital projects as well as some of the 2021 projects that we have started already this year. Before I get into it, I just wanted to note that there are a couple of corrections in the report that will be updated prior to submitting it to council. Our permit to take water was actually renewed in November, so we have a new permit to take water for the water treatment plant. And that was just a renewal, so no additional capacity, just the same as what we had before. And an additional water main break happened on December 5th on Campbell Street that was not identified. All right, we'll get into it then. Next slide. So I have a lot of capital projects to give you an update on. We've been very busy couple years. As you are aware, our treatment plant municipal class EA to expand and upgrade the facility was completed in fall 2020. And we were also able to complete our roof repairs at the treatment plant last year. So that project is now entering in the warranty phase. Water main replacements on Napier and Campbell Street were completed in the fall as well. So they're in the warranty phase. And the same as the elevated water tower. So we had some minor repairs there that we completed last fall. The Osler Bluff booster pumping station contract was awarded late last summer, and work started last fall and carried on through the winter, and it's actually just wrapping up. We commissioned the station last week, so hoping to enter into the warranty phase on that one shortly as well. The Stewart Road Reservoir and Booster Pumping Station and 10th Line Water Main, that design is ready to go, but we're holding on before issuing that one to see where we end up with the front-ending agreement for that, since it is being built to service new development on the west side of town and coordinating with developers on some of the cost. The Carmichael Reservoir and Booster Pumping Station upgrades are still in design phase, and we're targeting to issue it for tender later this year. Next slide. So some of our newer 2021 water capital projects that we've been working on this year. So our water treatment plant design, our RFP is in progress. It's pretty much ready to go. So just a couple T's to cross and I's to dot. And when we get that water supply agreement with New Tecumseh, we'll be able to put that on the market for design. So very exciting. And the water treatment plant structural inspection is in progress. So this is something that we're doing under the refurbishment project for the water treatment plant. And we've had some ongoing settlement issues there, and they seem to be escalating as we continue to wait for the upgrades to be completed. So we've retained a consultant and engineer to inspect the site up and set up some monitoring points to allow us to monitor the situation and implement some remedial work as required in the interim. The SCADA software procurement and standards development. So we have a RFP that went to market earlier this year in late January, and we are in the midst of evaluating proposals, hoping to get that awarded in the next couple of weeks, with the target of going out to market for software RFPs in the summer this year. And kind of coordinating with that project is the Davy Reservoir bulk water upgrades. So the bulk water station at the Davy Reservoir site will need to be upgraded to be compatible with our changes to our operating system and SCADA software. So we're working on the design of that and have the new system installed so we don't have any interruption in service when we do the SCADA upgrades later. The water treatment plant membrane replacement is a big one. We ordered them last year, but we're waiting delivery and looking to have that replacement done late May, early June, slightly delayed due to COVID, unfortunately. Shipping challenges, as everybody knows, with all materials and supplies these days. So just hoping we don't get any further delays with that one. And later this year, we're going to get into the 6th Street water main replacement and upsize. So that's tied again into the Stewart Road Reservoir. So enable us to get water across town to the west side and service the west side of town. So trying to get that designed and constructed before that facility comes online. And then water meter analytics software, we're going to start later this year as well. Next slide. So from a wastewater perspective on capital, last year we completed the painting at the Minnesota sewage pumping station. So it looks, blends into the environment a little bit better and hopefully add some, I don't know how do you say this. You put a dress on a pig, but it's still a pig, as they like to say about wastewater, but hopefully it looks a little bit better for our residents and businesses in the area. And the wastewater treatment plant generator, that was completed last June and it's still in the warranty phase, but we're just getting ready to do the warranty inspection on that one. Black Ash Creek sewage pumping station was a big project and that was completed last fall. So again, we're in the warranty phase. And a 2-year project multi-year project that we've been doing at the wastewater treatment plant was some brick replacement and masonry repairs. So phase 1 is in warranty and phase 2 is currently under construction, just trying to wrap up a few things now and hoping to get that into warranty phase in the next month or two. Sludge pump, transfer pump is one that's carried over from last year. So we did the design last year and we've got the tender issued now. Hopefully be able to get construction on that started this summer. Next, and in 2021, some new projects that we're working on, the Patterson sewage pumping station pump and VFD replacements. So that's currently in the design phase. And we're working on VFD replacements at the influent pumps at the wastewater treatment plant as well. So that RFP or RFQ is in progress. The screw pump rehab at the wastewater treatment plant is not started, but we're looking to get going on the design on that this summer. And then the inflow assessment for the wastewater treatment plant, looking at peak flows that come in and opportunities to prevent or mitigate this occurrence. So we'll be starting on that later this year as well, probably targeting the fall. And that's it. So lots going on in water and wastewater, and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you for that thorough presentation. Before I turn this over to the committee, I wanted to ask if there's any questions or comments from the public on this matter.
Chair Hammond, we do have one person on the line. They're participating by phone, so I'm not quite sure who it is. So as soon as I allow you to speak, you can press *6 and please announce who you are. So you should be able to press *6.
Good evening, friends. It's Matt Preddy here.
Hi, Matt.
Rest today. It's stormy and good indoor day. That's exceptional. Those projects that were listed, well done. You know, engineering, from what I know, it's sort of those projects are not in your Collingwood Connection newspaper, and we don't really hear about those activities publicly. Just a quick point. Do you think Birch Street is becoming unsafe with the amount of sewage pump trucks going in and out of there? Do we need a light at that location like Miss Mooy there? I feel very responsible for that lady's accident. There should be four stop signs there at that 4th and Pine Street location? Do we need a light at Birch Street? And are the water levels low because we're pumping a lot of water to New Tecumseh? Is that why the water levels are about 8 feet low? Thank you. Over to you, Chair Hamlin.
Thank you, Matt. Manager McGinnity, can you address either or both of those questions?
I'm not sure I could comment on the traffic concerns. I do acknowledge that there are a lot of trucks going in and out of there. It's a very busy spot, and when trying to use it as recreational purposes too in the park area, it can get a bit crowded down there. But I'm not sure I could speak to the requirement for traffic signals at that intersection, but I could put that question forward to our engineering services group and respond back to council on that if they would like. As for the water levels in the lake, I can't say specifically why they're much lower. It's been a fairly low precipitation over the winter. Lots of, dry, we didn't get much snow. We haven't had much rain this spring. And I think we're seeing that in the lake levels. The amount that we withdraw to supply our residents as well as the town of New Tecumseh and a little bit to the town of Blue Mountains as well wouldn't make a drop in the lake as far as I'm concerned. So no, I don't believe we had that impact or that impact on the water levels in the Collingwood in Georgian Bay.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes.
So I'm going to read in the recommendation now. It is that council receives staff report PW 2021-05, Environmental Services 2020 End of Year Operations Summary for information purposes. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Doherty, thank you. And would the Standing Committee have any questions of Manager McGinnity or comments on the report? Deputy Mayor Hall.
Comment, and that is that I think that Mr. Pretty is quite right. This is not a comment with regards to the local papers. It's a comment about, disseminating really positive information. Our federal and provincial counterparts do a good job in, promoting and advertising through the placement of billboards, that type of thing. Anytime there's an infrastructure project or some type of redevelopment that is using taxpayer dollars. And I'm not necessarily advocating that we spend taxpayer dollars to advertise where we're spending taxpayer dollars, but it is, this is something worthy of a press release and to really highlight, where good money, where good investment is being made in the community to support growth and long-term, well, not just growth, but maintaining the community and the growth within the community. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? I'd just like to add, I totally agree with Deputy Mayor Hall, and that I think people would like to know that we're busy at Town Hall looking after the infrastructure needs. Is this something that we need council direction on? This is a question for staff. Or can staff look further into this as an issue? CEO Skinner, would this be something you'd take a stab at?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think this is something that's been on staff's mind for a while, and there's been a number of council members who've commented about better publicizing all of our capital projects in general and also their status throughout the year. I know that the new treasurer, Quinlan, has been implementing some software that will help us to link project costs and status more easily. And certainly, I think that the suggestion that was made by you and the deputy mayor today is supported by staff, and we believe we do have some things in progress that will help residents understand what's happening with their user fees and tax dollars.
Oh, thank you. That's very helpful. All right, I'm going to move to the vote on this recommendation to receive the staff report. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The next staff report, this is P 2021-09 Site Plan Control Agreement for 10 Greco. Would Director Farr be presenting? Yes, there he is. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This is a site plan approval for your consideration for a property. It's located just east of the 10th line on the north side of Mountain Road in an industrial subdivision off Greco Court. Next slide, please. The proposals for a industrial building that has 10 units and is roughly 25,000 square feet. Next slide, can in this case to provide a higher quality landscape plan. Done a kind of creative job in the application of the materials. There's worker relaxation space design in and around this development, and it does set a high quality standard for development. And that effectively concludes my presentation.
And it looks like there's no one else wishing to speak at this time.
Okay, I'll read in the motion that staff report P 2021-09 site plan control agreement 10 Greco Court be received, and that council enact and pass authorization bylaw to execute site plan control agreement for the development of 10 Greco Court. May I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Doherty, Councillor Jeffrey, thank you. So would the standing committee have any questions or comments on the presentation and report? Deputy Mayor Hall and Councillor Doherty following.
Thank you. Through you to the director. Just for my clarification in terms of the process, and I apologize, I should know this cold, but I'm missing something. This structure already exists?
Through you, Madam Chair, Deputy Mayor Hall, this structure has received a number
to connect to the water and sewer. If the event that this project was not approved, as per the agreement, they were required to either demolish or make the necessary changes. I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful to understand. Deputy Mayor Hall, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I just wanted to thank the CBO for that explanation. And just to be transparent, I was out with my son as he continues to learn how to drive, and we pulled in onto that particular court to practice our parallel and backing up, etc. And I didn't know that that building was there. And then when this report came forward, knowing that Van Doler has been built, Sunbelt has been built, and the fact that the renderings match what's there, I was putting two and two together in my mind. So not questioning staff in terms of what they can and can't do, but just clarifying what I thought I saw the other night when I was out for a drive. So thank you.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Chair. So just a question and a comment directed to Director Farr. The question being, is this facility completely occupied or sorry, will it be occupied? Has there been uptake on all of these rental units?
Through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Doherty. My information on this is anecdotal, and it may be shared by members of a committee. I have heard that there's significant demand for industrial space in town, and that there's significant demand for space in this building in particular, but I don't have any more detail on it than that at this time.
Thank you.
That's great. And that's actually where I was going with that question. So thank you for that. And then just generally to make the comment to congratulate staff, and I presume also the developer for such attention to urban design at a location that is or at least the entire corner is very high profile for our community. And these are the kinds of things that speak very positively to our image and to our standards.
Thank you. Would any other member of the committee like to comment? I have just a brief comment. I'm just also wanted to commend staff for what I can see are definitely updated requirements for an industrial development. And I was so pleased to see, and I'm reading here, a continuous, dedicated, and accessible pedestrian path around the exterior of the building, because so many of the projects that get built, not just here, but in many communities, whether they're retail or industrial, there is nowhere for pedestrians to safely walk from where they've parked. And I also was so pleased to see the enhanced landscaping, including 31 trees with additional shrubs, ornamental grasses, I should say, and perennials. So thank you everyone for their hard work on that. So now I'm going to ask if we can have a vote on the acceptance of the staff report and the authorization. All those in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. The last staff report is P 2021-10, paid parking pilot project summary and recommendations. Director Farr, will you be providing an introduction to this report?
Yes, Madam Chair, very briefly, CBO and Manager of Bylaw Miller and his team have done a tremendous job in putting together this report on the paid parking pilot with a number of recommendations for your consideration. And I'll hand it over to CBO Miller for presentation and further discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of committee and council, and especially those watching our live stream this evening. I am pleased to present the report to committee this evening, a summary of the paid pilot project and recommendations for the committee and council's consideration. Although the staff report has my name and Director Farr's name on this report, it goes without saying that this was a result of excellent collaboration amongst bylaw staff and almost all the departments within our town. Parks, Recreation, Culture, Department, Public Works, Finance, and of course the fire departments. I would also like to thank bylaw staff and specifically bylaw supervisor Harrod and MLEO, Municipal Law Enforcement Officer Zeemstra, for their efforts bringing this report to you this evening. I think it goes without saying, and I also like to thank the residents of Collingwood for their patience over this past year and the previous years as we try and narrow down and solve some of the issues that we have in our beautiful waterfront properties. Madam Chair, one item I do need to clarify, Madam Chair, and that's with respect to the cost of the proposed resident parking pass. Within your package this evening, it is noted that Appendix A, where we have the staff recommendations, specifically item 6, it is noted that we are recommending a $20 fee for that resident parking pass. I just want to assure the committee and council and the public that we are not at this time, or are we ever going to be looking at charging a $20 fee for this resident pass at this time. So we do need to amend the Appendix A. This item unfortunately also got into the fees and charges bylaw, so we'll certainly update that for council as well. I do apologize for that oversight. I know there's some members of the public that wrote in via email over the weekend and this evening, and I feel like I've let out the proverbial cat in the pigeon house on this. I just want to reassure that we are not charging a fee. That resident fee is going to be free for Sunset Point and Princeton Shores at this point. Unless there are any questions, Madam Chair, I have a very brief presentation to review some of the highlights of the report.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we proceed to slide 2, during the presentation, I'll be providing a brief history of the challenges at our waterfront parks and amenities. I'll be providing an overview of the paid pilot project that we completed in 2020. I'll also provide an overview and highlights of the staff recommendations and of course, the next steps and for recommendations on those. As we go into slide 3, this goes without saying that our waterfront parks and amenities in Collingwood have become a very popular destination. This is great. However, this certainly does pose challenges from a parking and traffic control perspective. And in 2020, Council amended the parking bylaw that introduced no parking along Niagara Street, especially south of Erie Street, and that was to avoid the spillover from the Sunset Point traffic. We also amended the parking bylaw that included no parking along Niagara Street, north of Pretty River, and that was essentially due to the health and safety issues and blocking of the EMS passageway, if you will. Also, in last year, in 2020, we implemented no parking along Oliver Crescent in St. Lawrence Street. So this has been an ongoing issue at Sunset Point, and we've been making some changes and trying to have a more positive experience for people to enjoy the waterfront properties. Also in 2019, staff implemented parallel and angled parking along St. Lawrence Street, again, after we had some feedback from the public. From our perspective, the bylaw amendments have been very effective to date. Last year that we noticed, especially on Niagara Street, there was no parking. It took a bit of education of the public, but we do believe that was a bit of more orderly traffic control, and having no parking there certainly assisted having that open thoroughfare for EMS. There certainly has been a more orderly parking maintained versus the chaotic and overwhelmingly negative traffic experience that we experienced in July of last year. When I speak of Sunset Point, on the next slide here, I do have an overview of Sunset Point. It doesn't include the entire park, however, it does include the main parking areas. To the far east is a gravel parking lot along the waterfront, or the water treatment plant. All right, next slide, please. All right, as I mentioned, there's been a number of parking bylaw amendments to date. The main parking bylaw, the major one that we had, was to deal with the safety issues, the disruption of traffic flow, and again, to avoid that spillover effect. And we want to kind of minimize the impact of residential properties within Sunset Point area, because this is a very unique waterfront park, if you will, because it's embedded in a residential area, and we've had people that had not only blocked EMS passageways, but also driveways. So from our perspective, this has been working fairly well. As we proceed on to the next slide, COVID-19 has certainly impacted our bylaw enforcement complement, certainly impacted Collingwood as much as globally. But in July of last year, we really experienced an unprecedented number of people. I would use the term chaos. We had an unprecedented volume of people come to our waterfront properties. We had some neighbors that closed their parks and so forth for a short period of time. There was local neighborhoods that were charging for parking, and lo and behold, here at Collingwood, our beautiful waterfront parks, we weren't charging for parking, so we had just a tremendous overflow. So in July of 2020 last year, we did implement informal measures. We did implement a resident-only parking lot. That was a gravel parking lot, and we also had PRC staff that screened that lot. It wasn't the ideal lot for residents. We had a number of complaints that has been highlighted in the report. We understand that, and we've certainly made some recommendations in our staff report that we'll review further on. The next slide, please. Moving on to the paid parking pilot program. Council asked staff to implement this in July of last year. And so we proceeded to do that. We implemented the paid parking pilot from the Labor Day weekend to the Thanksgiving weekend, again, at Sunset Point in Princeton Shores. And it was in place from Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays, a long weekend. And we charge a parking rate of $5 per hour. With respect to the paid parking, next slide, please. We introduced the concept of a pay by phone parking. And even though the pilot was short, it was only 6 weekends. It gave us a good opportunity to test out our hotspot parking app. This app it's been a real game changer for the administration and enforcement of parking in the town of Collingwood. Hotspot is the vendor that we chose through an open market RFP, and it's greatly assisted us in our parking program. 10 years ago, if you had asked me that our bylaw enforcement officers would be able to use license plate recognition software to write a parking ticket, I wouldn't believe you, but that's in fact what we're doing with this hotspot parking program. It also allows the public to scan a QR code, which is a quick response code. You see that in many commercial products, you simply scan it and brings up the website and so forth. So that allows the public to pay through that parking app. So this parking pilot, even though it's short term, it really gave us a good opportunity to kind of get the bugs out of the system, kind of get some feedback from the public, and we certainly include that in the staff report. And we took a lot of time to review some of those comments. And again, we were looking to decrease the overcrowding in our parks, and of course improve the parking and traffic flow. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the hotspot parking system, during the paid pilot project in September, we had 982 transactions. We also did 502 plate searches by bylaw enforcement staff, and that's with the license plate recognition software that I had mentioned. We expended approximately 283 staff hours. That's a combination of PRC staff. We had 2 PRC staff that screened the resident parking only lot, as well as bylaw enforcement. The revenue generated in September alone, that was between paid parking revenue and the fines, was just under $16,000. Next slide, please. So moving forward with the recommendations that we do have in the report this evening, and I apologize for the length of the report. There are a lot of pieces to this puzzle. We are recommending to the committee and of course council to implement paid parking permanently at Sunset Point and Princeton Shores. So we also were looking at implementing a resident parking pass system. Again, as I mentioned before, we are not looking at charging a fee for this. We are wanting to make this as convenient as possible for our residents. That includes implementing an online registration system, as well as having in-payment person options at town hall. So we want to make this as convenient as possible. We understand, and we certainly had received a lot of feedback that it's great that we're optimizing this technology. However, not everyone has, the luxury or convenience of having a phone, or they can't pay by phone or credit card. So we do have to come up with these cash payment options, if you will. With respect to resident-only parking spaces, we heard the public loud and clear. We don't want, the public said, hey, don't put us in a dusty parking spot full of potholes and everything. That was a temporary measure, and we certainly appreciate the public's patience with respect to that. The reason why we went with that is because it was the largest area that we could dedicate to the residents. What we are looking at is actually just adjacent to the Enviro Park. There are 30 angled spots. We are looking at dedicating that only for Collingwood residents only. That does not mean that they cannot park anywhere within Sunset Point. That doesn't restrict them just to those 30 spots. If council or the committee and council go ahead with your recommendations, if you are a Collingwood resident, you have a parking pass, you can park anywhere with Sunset Point, just that we are dedicating those 30 spots on a first come, first served basis. The other reason for us picking that spot is and we're going to the next slide. As I mentioned, we want to implement cash payment alternatives to our digital payments. I won't go into too much detail. I think I've already covered that. But we're also recommending to purchase and install 3 pay stations at Sunset Point. And again, this would augment our digital payment system. These pay stations, we can integrate them with our hotspot system as well, our hotspot system program, where people would pay by cash. They would issue a parking, they'd actually register the license plate, and then we can go ahead and bylaw enforcement can double check to make sure they have paid. So that can be implemented in our hotspot parking system. The reason why I mentioned before with the 30 angle parking spots by Environment Park is that we want to install these 3 pay stations adjacent to the accessible parking areas, if you will. These pay stations have to comply with AODA standards, and that's part and parcel why we want to have those 3 pay stations on that side of the park. With respect to implementing parking rates of $7 per hour, we did hear loud and clear that $5 per hour it was simply not high enough. I should note during as highlighted in the staff report, we did consult with local municipalities, Wasaga Beach, Blue Mountains, Barrie, and Innisfil. So the parking rates, we were pretty much the lowest at $5 per hour, and the highest was $10 per hour in Barrie. I should point out too that we just became aware that the city of Barrie has also gone with hotspot. So we're looking forward to some collaboration with Barrie on some of the hotspot and how we can optimize this further. Also, we were looking at implementing an all-day rate of $50. That's in line with other municipalities as well. Next slide, please. One thing that we did have, it was very evident when we had discussions with our municipalities, local municipalities, and determine best practices. Also, the public feedback that we had that our fines is just simply aren't high enough. There's $30 and $20 early payment. So we're looking at increasing those fines. Finally, we are looking at recommending implementing a seasonal non-resident parking pass for the neighboring residents. This would be a $100 pass for Clearview, Town of Blue Mountains, and Wasaga Beach residents. That was certainly one of the feedbacks that we had as well. Next slide. All right. So back to committees and of course council review and approval. We are looking to implement all recommendations for the May long weekend. Our time frame is very short. We have not purchased the 3 pay stations. We want to wait until we have the proper notifications. We have gone through the proper procurement channels to procure those 3 pay stations, but we have not purchased those as of today. We have consulted with Hotspot, and they are confident that they'll have this resident parking pass system up and going by the May long weekend. With that, we do have a robust communications plan that we are working on. Of course, that includes updating the website. And of course, depending on recommendations of committee and council this evening, we'll certainly monitor and report back to council. With that, Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that the committee or the public may have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation, CBO Miller. And Deputy Clerk Dahl, would you have members of the public who would like to address the committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that there are some attendees here that are interested in speaking to this item, so I'll just ask you if you could raise your hand. So we have 3 hands raised so far. So I'll go with the first on the list here. So Georgia Jacoby, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I'll just allow you to speak. And you just need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for listening to my concerns. As some of you are aware already, my major concern is regarding Princeton Shores Park and the parking situation there. I want to make sure that, unlike the long weekend when the pilot project was run and it was just paid parking and no parking for residents, that the new plan will actually allow residents to park there with a resident parking permit. So that's the first question. Will residents be able to park at Princeton Shores with a resident parking permit, which was not the case in the pilot project? Also, I'm concerned because Princeton Shores has at most 12 parking spots, and that's with small vehicles. Most of the time, 10 parking spots and it's full. There's nowhere to park except on the roads which of course the residents are very upset about because, again, driveways get blocked and the street gets blocked. I am concerned because of the size of the lot that if paid parking is also implemented, that there will not be any spaces or very few spaces left for the residents. I spend a lot of time at Princeton Shores. I'm there almost daily. What was experienced last year was quite dramatic. Also, in light of the fact that the Georgian Bay Hotel across on Highway 26 send their visitors over to Princeton, seemed to be under the impression that this was the hotel's private beach. So a number of residents and local had to correct that perception to people. So if there is paid parking, people will come, and if there's all day paid parking, it could be that there will be no room for the residents to come and play tennis in the public courts, or people to just come and enjoy that little tiny piece of land. So that is my major concern about Princeton Shores. I'd also like to make a comment with respect to the parking at Sunset Point. I am not sure that 30 spots will be enough. I know in the report it stated that the resident parking lot was never fully occupied. That is incorrect. I went there twice and was turned away. And this was like at 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning. And the resident parking lot was full. So I just want to make sure that my concern here is with 30 spots, I don't think residents will be any further ahead in terms of finding a parking spot at Sunset Point. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions. CBO Miller, would you like to address the questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I guess first of all, I apologize if you had been turned away last year. That's unfortunate. That is some of the challenges that we're facing, unfortunately, in Sunset Point, especially with Ron residents coming early and taking up some of those spots. I thank you for your feedback. I really do appreciate it. We do take all these feedbacks. We do review all of these. And with respect to Princeton Shores, we are looking at implementing no parking along certain portions of Princeton Shores Boulevard. We've had discussions internally with Public Works, and they're concerned with cars on both sides of Princeton Shores. So we are looking at implementing a no parking zone. But you do raise a valid point. If we do implement paid parking at Princeton Shores, similar to Sunset Point, we could very well have people parking all day when our residents would not have the opportunity for parking spaces. So I think we can give this a bit more thought on how we can effectively manage this. We certainly don't want to preclude our residents from parking and enjoying the tennis courts and so forth. So we can certainly review this further, Madam Chair. Perhaps we can have some signage that says residents only. If we can certainly assign a portion of those as well. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, the no parking along Princeton Shores, we are looking at amending a bylaw to help us with that situation. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Yes, thank you very much.
The other, maybe CBO Miller, the question about there only being 30 spaces at Sunset Point for residents. Could you all, I think you did address that briefly in your report. Could you just address that again, perhaps?
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I just want to reiterate that this 30 spots is in front of the Enviro Park, this angled spots. We're open to having, if there's desirous of the committee and council, we can certainly, we can change any parking areas that we like or that they like. Again, we have to start somewhere. So this is, a good starting point for us. We thought a recommendation is to assign those 30 angled parking spaces. Given that it'd be for residents, they do not have to pay, then they will not have to use the pay stations that we had mentioned So that was basically the purpose of that. But again, as I mentioned, this is I'm certainly this will be a work in progress for the next year or so. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Deputy Clerk Dahl, could we have the next person, please?
Madam Chair, the next person in the attendees list wishing to speak is Paul. So Paul, will unmute you, and if you can please provide us with your full name.
Yes, good evening. I'm Paul Douglas. I'm a resident of Collingwood. I want to follow up a little bit on what Georgia Jacoby said, and actually a little bit more precisely. I believe I commend what you're doing in terms of the approach to trying to install parking pay. I would offer respectfully to the entire group of you that we as residents of Collingwood are paying rather significant taxation so that we can actually enjoy the rights to actually access our waterfront. We don't really feel good about subsidizing a significant number of Torontonians coming up here to use our park to the exclusion of us. And I understand that, you know, I've had conversations with different representations in your group that it's part of the appeal of Collingwood that this is a destination. Respectfully to the group of you, I would offer that that's why we moved here. That's why we pay the high taxation that we do, because we do love this town and we love the access to what we've got in this town. We do not at all love not being able to access it. We don't at all love being relegated to a certain area or anything like that in the park. We do not at all love not being able to bring our grandchildren there on weekends because Toronto's there. The parking cost that you're advocating is $7 per parking spot. I would respectfully say that sounds like it's pretty minor in terms of it being it's not a prohibition. It's just simply a tag. I would ask respectfully that the council perhaps give consideration to the thought that we should try to dissuade some people from coming here. And I understand that sounds very bad, and I know the tone of what you're hearing doesn't sound positive at all. But it's not positive. And I do represent the feelings of quite a number of townspeople, and we've had a lot of conversations around this, and I think people are frustrated. I mean, just for example, there's some significant number of houses that are being added to the town of Collingwood right now, so that even the residents themselves will comprise a fairly significant population pressure on our resources. And if we open this with the apparent, and again, I believe that the $7 is it's better than decorative, but it's not at all restrictive. I think it does not actually provide any deterrent to the significant numbers of people from Toronto that view our park as a great place to come. So cranky old guy in Collingwood, taxpayer, all that sort of stuff, and I do feel saddened to see that we are basically losing access to our park because you're not doing anything to restrict it. And I understand that the no parking zones are great and all that sort of stuff, but the charging $7 is not a restriction. It's you got 10 people come out of a car and they'll split that easily, and it'll be great. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Paul. And you mentioned there's another person, Deputy Clerk Dahl.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have two more people in the audience wishing to speak. The next one on the list is Rachel May. So I'll just allow you to talk, Rachel, and then you can unmute yourself. There you go. No, we can't hear you though.
Hang on. I said
there we go. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's great.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Hamlin and members of your council. You've received the letter that I sent, kind of a committee presentation. You probably have read it. that was sent to you earlier today from the clerk. Have you seen it?
Yes, we have it.
So I'm not going to read it for you. You can, I'm sure you have, but important points that I will stick to. First, I'll start with what Paul said. We represent a group of over 50 Collingwood residents. And the issue about parking, when he said $7, I understand it's $7 an hour. But I think, like in Blue Mountain, I spoke to Blue Mountain, it's a maximum of 4 hours. There's no daily rate. After that, and it's true for most people, you go to the beach, you do your thing and you leave, you're done. Then that leaves more space for other people. But what is missing in the report is that, what is the people capacity in Sunset Point Park? When I look at the numbers of parking from the 2016 report, it says there was 316 spaces. So now, instead of trying to create more spaces, we need to contain what's there. And with COVID, I'm even thinking maybe the east side parking lot should be staying closed until COVID gets better. Just today, we've had 4,400 cases. So it's not going to be done for the whole summer season. So why are we trying to increase the parking? I don't think we should. We really do need to think of what is the capacity. When you think parking, it's people in cars, like 3, 10, you know, people have come in herds last summer. It's also walking, people that walk, people that ride their bike, people that go park at the Legion because it's free. And now this new building from Park Ridge, that will be filled with people on the weekend. They have a big parking in the back. So they look for parking everywhere. So this all count in the number of people that are in Sunset Point. So what is the capacity? Do you know? So as far as COVID, that's to me the big thing. That's the first thing we need to think of. We don't need more crowds. We don't need to get, you know, it was impossible last summer. And I have been to the beach twice, which was a real shame. But there was no way I was going to show up there on a weekend. So that's the big issue. And there's other issues that we've talked about in this letter that we would like to hear from the next staff report on the other issues, which are, you know, barbecues and tents and all the other stuff that is mentioned here. Those are issues that are quite also serious and that need to be considered. I think that's my little talk here. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for Rachel Committee? No? So thank you for those questions you've raised. You've raised some good points for us to consider. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have anything to say about the limit on parking?
So I'll just ask CBO Miller. I know, well, let me just ask you the question. Has staff turned their mind to what the proper capacity is of this park and whether it should be any different this summer because of the variants of concern that, you know, are out there now?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had an internal discussion. We did confirm that there does remain 316 parking spots. With respect to the capacity, we reached over capacity a number of times this past summer. When we implemented the resident-only parking lot, we also have PRC staff and bylaw staff working together to keep track of the number of cars, and we actually posted signs that the park was at full capacity. That's dealing with the parking capacity itself. Unfortunately, I do not have the calculations of how many maximum number of people should be permitted at Sunset Point. I'd have to turn to PRC staff. I can certainly get that information for you.
I see Acting Executive Director Culver has turned his video on. Could you shed some light on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Actually, unfortunately, no, I can't. Amongst my colleagues, it's always been a challenge, and especially in the COVID period to try and determine what constitutes a capacity on what basis. We did draw circles on the ground last year in an effort to determine a capacity based on the provincial guidelines and the radius around each group of people. That's the best we've been able to come up with so far. And again, I'm in contact with about 50 of my colleagues across the province. And to date, no one has figured out a way to determine sort of the capacity of an open park that has a number of access points any more than we could determine the capacity of a sidewalk. It's a very difficult concept. We'd be drawing an arbitrary number and then calling it that, and then trying to figure out how to stem all of the inputs to that park. Particularly challenging question. I'm sorry, it's not a better answer.
Yeah, no, thank you for taking a stab at it. If I can just add, really it's a province-wide, maybe country-wide problem. Everyone who has a park at any level of government must be thinking about this right now. All right. Do we have, you mentioned there was one other person who wished to speak?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one more person in the audience, but Sonia, or CAO Skinner, had her request to speak card up, so I don't know if she wants to talk first.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to add some content that's very similar to that has already been covered by Executive Director Culver, and just to acknowledge that it is challenging and we are keeping our eye on overall capacities as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, we have one other person in the audience, and it's Matthew Pretty. So I will unmute you, Matthew. You can press *6 to speak. There you go.
Thank you, Becky. Those were really good perspectives from persons who are homeowners in this town. To be a homeowner in this town these days is becoming more of a value. The value of owning a home in this town at a starting rate of maybe $700,000 to buy, it's a high value situation. I would encourage by law to hire more persons, PRC staff to have more persons present on the weekends to set up stations that have umbrellas, maybe a cabin, deploy the cabins. Please put out more bathrooms this year. I saw the men's urinal, the men's stand up, and the men's sit down. They closed the men's stand up and the men's sit down. There was only one stand up and one sit down. I don't know what the plan is here, guys, but that's totally irresponsible. Please deploy more bathrooms, 2 at a time in the different locations. You know, town council and departments, that there are many people coming up here. I'm always on the phone here about slow people down first, add more lights, that pedestrian crosswalk in Niagara. If people are parking on Niagara South, it'll be safer for them to cross. There are people running across the parkway last year to get to the park. That's extremely unsafe. And now we've got construction on Turtle Trail by the courthouse, and that path might not be open for people to get through. Why not introduce people to the Legion? We could set people up there. They could park at the Legion and walk across at that light safely, as there's construction for this fantastic new crosswalk at Niagara and then Turtle Trail along the courthouse. You know, fine and dandy. And this is all good stuff, especially as I was chatting with Dean this week. He said the ecologist has been commenced the discussions with the ecologists, which is really good because that mixed wildlife, like Bud Powell was saying last year, people are dumping coal in the water, or who knows what's going on. People are having potty time in the bushes and the trees, and that's why we need more blue portable washrooms out there. But you know what, guys? Maybe we should close the park on the weekend. Just close it. Just close it. Close it down. Because, yeah, I'm on lockdown now for the 3rd, 4th time. I'm starting to feel really weird here. Like, it's unsafe at night downtown. Trust me, it's not safe. And guess what? All these residents, visitors coming up from the city, yeah, that's unsafe as well. First Street, going to Blue and back, you don't know who these people are. It's dangerous. It's totally dangerous. Go up and talk to those people. Say, hey, move your car. Go do this. Go do that. Do your thing. There could be a fatality in relation to that kind of thing. Some of these people that come up here, like, they're dangerous. And some of these people are not dangerous. But with the COVID program internationally, that's dangerous. There's a lot of danger going on right now. This is not Elvis Festival 2021. This is welcome to the COVID International Takeover Program, and it is dangerous. So shut it down, close it. End of discussion.
Thank you for your comments, Matthew. All right. Is that it for the public, Deputy Clerk Dahl?
Madam Chair, there is one more hand raised. I believe it is George Powell, but if you can just confirm when I unmute you, George. And you should be good to speak.
Okay, you do that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I just like to provide some observations and concerns. A couple of questions, people have brought up the capacity issue of the park, and I think that's really important. You can have all the parking spots you want, but if the capacity of the park isn't known, it doesn't really help you much. The traffic flow is important in the area, especially for the residents that on Niagara Street and within Sunset Point. And I think the speed limit should actually be lowered. Should be down at 10 kilometers an hour, to try to control the traffic. When they come around the corner and up Niagara Street, the majority are certainly not going 10 kilometers. They're going much faster at times. I would think that the entrance off Niagara Street onto the Pretty River Parkway, people have said there should be a crosswalk there. It's not a good spot for a crosswalk, certainly because of the sight lines that as you come down Pretty River, it's on a curve. So traffic lights would work, but what the issue really is that as it is now, you can't turn left without, if people are cautious, turning left is a real issue. Either trying to come down Pretty River and turning left onto Niagara, or going up Niagara, turning right or left. That's a safety issue. The place to grow, is bringing in people and increasing densities. And the one thing that I feel strongly about is there should be some park addition. There should be some compensation for that in terms of the park. We should put more emphasis on the parks and creating parks. And in my opinion, obviously the Sunset Point during the period we were looking at is at capacity. We can't, they're parking all over the place. And even doing what Mr. Miller said, I can show you on, I think it's back in the 27th of July 2019, they were parking on our lawn, they were parking all over the place. So the issue here is the park in good weather is going to be used, and it's going to be at capacity or over capacity. The bathroom issue you brought up, but we need to think about that and see if we can come up with a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, we've had some great feedback tonight from the community on this report. Is that all the speakers then at this point, Deputy Clerk Dahl?
Madam Chair, I'll call for the last time. So if there's anyone else wishing to speak to this item, if you could please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of the screen. And I believe that would be it for this report.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to read in the recommendation. The council received staff report P 2021-10, paid parking pilot project summary and recommendations, and that council endorsed staff recommendations as outlined in this report, and that council directs staff to implement permanent paid parking at Sunset Point Park and Princeton Shores Park as outlined in the report, and that council enact and pass a bylaw to amend parking control bylaw number 2003-62 as recommended by staff and the Development and Operations Standing Committee, and that council directs staff to continue to monitor other areas such as Millennium and Harbour View Park to determine the need to expand paid parking to those and other recreational areas in future years. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Doherty, thank you. I'd like to open this up to the Standing Committee for their comments or questions. Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Doherty, and then Deputy Mayor Hall.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My first question was with respect to the Princeton Shores and maybe looking at taking another. I think we need to get going because we need to have this. I just want to make sure that we don't need to expand the wording somehow to facilitate these changes between now and
the bylaw as it stands now. With respect to the changes, I do recall we had a similar discussion with the parking bylaw last time. We had some feedback from residents, and we quickly turned that staff report around in time for council. Councillor Jeffrey does make a good point. We are coming down to the wire if we were to have some of these recommendations be brought forward. If that's the wish of the committee to provide a recommendation from council, we can certainly do that. We can certainly make that parking area strictly for residents. I'm sorry, Councillor Jeffrey. Basically, the nuts and bolts of this residential parking pass.
I'm just wondering if we considered some short-term parking for local residents for that. And I don't know who that would be through to. I guess maybe CBO Miller.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. CBO Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Jeffrey raises a good point, and we actually did have that discussion internally, especially with PRC staff. Unfortunately, I did not include that in my staff report. So we are looking at dedicating some spots temporarily for clients of the chipper down there.
Okay, that's great. And just one last, I'm just wondering if when we finally have the splash pad up and running through you, Madam Chair, if there's any speculation that it will be able to take a bit of pressure off Sunset Point in terms of activity for kids.
Director Culver.
Yeah, through you, Chair. We're looking at enhancements at both Millennium Park and the upcoming water play area at Harbourview, which will more than likely be on stream for next year. But these are all opportunities to distribute people along the waterfront.
They certainly did give me cause for thought. I had operated on the assumption that the number of parking spaces that we have correlated to the capacity that we have in the park. Certainly anecdotally, after we got the illegal parking under control last summer, so that we restricted it on the residential street and such, it certainly did seem as though the numbers in the park were much more manageable. But that's strictly an anecdotal observation on my part. But it leads me to another question, and it has to do with the situation that we find ourselves in right now, and that is a stay-at-home order, an emergency order, which hopefully by the time the summer is upon us, we aren't under such an order at that time, but we are at the moment. So my question is, how will we control the groups of people in terms of the numbers in a cluster, whether they are consistent with the Ontario health regulations or not, and also the social distancing? Will that be a function of bylaw, or will that be a function of OPP? And will there be some communication so that we can confirm that everyone, not just our residents, but everyone is safe at our public places during this state of emergency? And I guess that's through you to CBO Miller.
Thank you. CBO Miller, would you like to answer that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Councillor Doherty. Exactly, you raise an excellent point. I do want to give some confidence that our bylaw enforcement staff, we have been actively enforcing the provincial emergency orders, and along with our partners, the OPP and the health unit, sorry, we have expended almost 2,400 bylaw enforcement hours. Most of that's been at Sunset Point. And we have been actively enforcing last year, and even, as we ramp up to being busy again. Bylaw staff are very active in enforcing the social gatherings, and the maximum numbers that were permitted. Executive Director Culver mentioned the white circles, and that certainly helped us addressing the distancing requirements as well. So I can assure you that we have put a lot of effort and hours into that. Any circumstance that we require, especially with a large group, we have been in this pandemic, as we all know, for over a year now. Public frustration is such that we are getting repercussions from the public. We had a very good meeting with the OPP and the health unit today, and this was a topic of discussion. So we don't engage in a large group unless we have OPP, but we are actively enforcing this. We are patrolling, and we will be ramping up our patrolling as it relates to COVID-19 in the pandemic. We are currently going through the hiring process for 4 summer municipal law enforcement officers. That's going to greatly assist us in managing the traffic issues, the parking issues, and not only that, but the COVID-19 and so forth. So I can assure you that we are doing that.
Thank you. And just follow up on that question. For as long as we have a stay-at-home order in place, are we tracking the origin of vehicles that we are finding parked in our public places? These days, I suppose between the hotspot technology and the fact that most cars and plates can easily be, or their origin can easily be seen. Is there an opportunity for us to tag vehicles or some other action to actually indicate to that person that they actually shouldn't even be here, that they should be staying at their residence?
CBO Miller, would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's certainly a perspective that if there is a stay-at-home order, that's rather difficult for bylaw enforcement staff to do. As you mentioned, we do have the hotspot technology app, but we want to be transparent up front that we're using this information strictly for parking only. I don't think it would be wise that we use this information to charge people. I think we have other avenues and channels that we can effectively do that, and that's with our partners with the OPP. And unfortunately, even through this past weekend, Collingwood was very busy, and unless we close the borders of Collingwood and screen people, I don't see any other effective way for bylaw enforcement to manage that. I don't think we want to start doing that. We simply don't have the staff hours or staff people to be doing that. I think if we do, as I mentioned, we would certainly involve our OPP partners.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. That would likely be beyond the purview of bylaw, but it seems to me to be an important question in that the genesis of this particular stay-at-home order is because of very serious escalation in numbers, and that actions like these, actually to tell people to go home, may be the next thing that we, if not we being the town, then
we being our OPP have to enforce. So I'm planting that seed. You actually did talk about how busy we were this weekend, and that sort of leads me to my next question. And that was, you're recommending that our seasonal parking rates would come into play starting Victoria Day weekend. And I'm wondering if consideration could be or should be given to making it earlier than that. And I'm just going to say arbitrarily April 1st, because we know that we will have some exceptionally warm weekends between then and Victoria Day weekend, generally speaking. And we may be in a situation where we have uncontrolled parking unless we have these parking fees in place earlier.
CBO Miller, can you address that, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, that's a good point. For us to do that, we would have to amend our parking bylaw. As the committee and members of the council may recall, that we amended the parking bylaw last year to have no parking from Victoria Long weekend to the Thanksgiving weekend. I think we won't be able to do that this year, but we can certainly, moving forward, we can certainly, what I would perhaps recommend is that staff monitor this over the next, 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And if we feel that we should come back with a recommendation, perhaps we can bring it back, implement no parking sooner. I think that might be my recommendation on that. But I agree, that's a valid point for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. So, and that sort of leads me to my next question, and that is the no parking areas. Are those in place only seasonally, or are they in place for 12 months of the year?
CBO Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To you, Councillor Doherty. You're correct. The no parking areas, especially the side streets within the Sunset Point, that is seasonal no parking. So as you mentioned, for Victoria Day long weekend to Thanksgiving weekend, that's when that will be in place.
Right.
The recommendations we also have is essentially the same for paid parking. Have the paid parking concurrently with those dates as well.
Is there any wisdom in instituting the no parking zones for 12 months of the year, just to make sure that our roads are always passable, especially by emergency vehicles, and also for the convenience and safety of the residents that live on those streets?
CBO Miller, can you address that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I'd be the best person to answer that. I can certainly engage a discussion with Public Works, your comments and feedback, if we can do that 12 months of the year. I think Public Works would want to have some input on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. In regard to the Princeton Shores, and there's been some discussion there, it's been acknowledged that the number of parking spaces or the legitimate parking spaces that are available at Princeton Shores are very limited. Is there an opportunity to make spaces along the road also pay for parking? The legal spaces along the road, because I feel like we would be fighting an uphill battle to try to reserve Princeton Shores entirely for the local population. So better that we create, in my view, create more legal parking, but also make sure that it's paid by non-residents and no charge for residents.
Director Culver, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry to intervene. I don't mean to, and I'm sure Greg's got great answers up his sleeve, but just a little backgrounding on Princeton Shores Park. So Princeton Shores was initially established as a neighborhood park. We have classifications of parks, community and neighborhood. Neighborhood is designed to look after the local residents within the same blockage, and community parks are where we have parking for people to come. Princeton Shores over time evolved into a community park because it was one of the few tennis facilities that we had available in town. And as the tennis community grew, so did the park. In recent years, it's become discovered as a shoreline access or a water launch access, but at its core, it's still a neighborhood park. So I can support definitely the idea of a residents only parking condition there, but I'd really struggle to support the idea of creating opportunity for visitorship, because that would be going against the base use of that park, in my opinion.
Okay, and I understand where you're coming from, but I'm just trying to anticipate what we might see again this summer at Princeton Shores. So short of not being able to, or short of being able to create more paid parking, will we be putting more stringent parking controls in place so that we don't have the parking chaos that we saw down there last summer? That question is for whoever wants to answer it.
So what CBO Miller and I have been discussing is the idea of no parking along the sides of Princeton Shores Boulevard. And very limited parking. So in other words, we would demarc exactly how many cars are able to park in essentially the dirt zone in front of the tennis courts. And then that would be the parking for that park. Again, it's a neighborhood park, so some limited amount of parking might be possible. And if council's wish is for it to be resident only, then absolutely we can support that. But the goal here is to make sure that it's not a destination. It's not supposed to be. It was never intended to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll also agree with some comments that were made by residents that the $7 per hour rate for Sunset Point Park is, in my view, too low. And I would like to see us follow perhaps the Barrie example of $10 per hour with a maximum of $50. And just looking at your data from last year, the duration of parking among visitors, it seems as though 4 to 5 hours would cover 70 to 80% of the visitors. So you'd get your turnover, and you wouldn't be offering too great of a discount with that maximum fee. So that would be my thought there. The final comment that I'll make is I was surprised not to see Millennium Park included in these recommendations because I know that it also was very busy last summer. There were people parking wherever they could. And in order to get control of the situation down there and earn revenue that covers our cost of managing those parks with those high volumes of people, it just seems to me that it would be a logical extension to include Millennium Park.
CBO Miller, could you address that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I may need Executive Director Culver assistance with this. We have reviewed some of the parking challenges. Simply put, we were focusing on the Sunset Point issues, the traffic flow and have you. Introducing paid parking is a relatively new concept for us here at a waterfront properties. And we thought we would address the situation at Sunset Point. We we are aware of some of the issues, parking challenges. Millennial Park is a bit different, as it's kind of ad hoc parking. There's no set parking spots along this area. There's larger vehicles, what have you. Council did amend the parking bylaw to have a better definition of an aisle, so that if someone is going along Heritage Drive, they're not blocking traffic. So we do have tools that we can use for that. Our recommendation at this point was that we would monitor this, and then we will come back with recommendations to council if need be. I do want to point out to the committee that council in the 2021 budget did approve for the hiring of a consultant to help us review parking across the entire town. When I say help us, that means we're going to look at our parking fees. Are there other areas that we should be implementing paid parking? Are there areas that we should be having no parking? So that is a project that we'll be starting to work on. Additionally, council approved, I believe, in the 2019 budget, $300,000 to as a capital project to replace our aging parking meters and pay stations. They've exceeded our useful life, so we are looking at replacing those as well. So I think with those two projects, we can include Millennium Park with that. I just think at this point in time, we were just trying to focus on the challenges that we've been given with Sunset Point. Anyways, hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
If I could add, your chair.
Yes,
Yeah,
go ahead.
thank you. Sorry. So keep in mind too that we have talked about all waterfront spaces ultimately becoming paid for parking. But keep in mind too, though, that one effect we wondered about, and it was reflected by one of the residents earlier, is what is the deterrent effect of charging for parking at Sunset? So if we make all areas parking, paid parking at this point, we won't really know if we're pushing people along the waterfront, right? So if Millennium becomes busier and Sunset becomes less busy, that's one way to know that parking is actually a deterrent. That's undetermined at this point, or sorry, paid parking. The other thing too is if we put paid parking in at Millennium, we have to consider all areas. We have to consider the marina. We have to consider Side Launch Way. We have to consider all of the parking along the roadside around the Crescent. And it's something that we think we need to do a lot of very careful thinking about before we create impacts that effectively have a ripple effect and move problems along the waterfront. So this is where a consultant could do a lot of good work to help us determine these things.
Thanks for that clarification.
Yes, thank you. So all that said, and I appreciate the rationale, but if we find ourselves in a serious situation at some point because of the numbers, and those numbers might be affecting our COVID safety, is it something that we can make a change on the fly this summer, or is it something that if we've made the decision now, there'll be no paid parking at Millennium? That's it. That's the end for 2021.
Executive Director Culver, would you like to address that?
Sorry. I feel like I'm jumping in on top of Greg's files, and I apologize for that. I have a little bit of a passion about this. So I don't want to answer categorically for CBO Miller, but I believe that we can implement it on the fly. It comes with QR codes that can be applied once a zone is established, and so that's my answer. But I would love for CBO Miller to confirm that. I also would like to say that we still have a conversation to have about the marina parking lot and boat launch. This was the beginning of a process, and we have had a talk about how we could further implement boat launch fees and basically get the revenues that area deserves through an application of the hotspot facility. So we're still talking about that, and I imagine we'll be back at council to discuss that further.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Those are my questions.
Thanks very much, Councillor Doherty. Deputy Mayor Hall, over to you.
Thank you. I think that most of my questions have been addressed. I am in favor of increasing the hourly parking fee, and I would like to move forward in approving tonight's report and moving it to council, but would be certainly prepared. It would appear that maybe there are others that would be prepared to table an amendment at that time to maybe address the specifics as it relates to the hourly rate. I think that a lot of time, effort has gone into this particular report, and I certainly appreciate the CBO and others for their time and their effort. This is a moving document. It's a living document. It's one that I think that we'll be dealing with a summer from now and years to come as the community continues to transition. This is a very bold statement, and I run the risk of being run out of town or maybe thrown in the water, but it'd be interesting to change the conversation as it relates to Sunset Park. And the conversation should be, what if we were to create a park that was car-free? And I realize that maybe that's not realistic given the fact that there are people who live within the park who have to access it by vehicle. There are areas of the park, for example, particularly the Enviro Park, where families are coming with young children and accessories that come with young children so that they can enjoy. But I know that there have been conversations about the park as it relates to the way it's designed, the way it was previously designed. It's interesting to chat with residents who recall the traffic circle that was once a part of St. Lawrence that's no longer there. But it'd be kind of neat to envision, one of the things that we witnessed over the past year as it relates to COVID was the use of our trails. And of course, in other municipalities, they broaden their trails to include roadways. And to see a road that, for example, if you came in off of Ontario North to St. Lawrence West across to One Niagara, and then One Niagara south back to the Pretty River Parkway, if that became a one-way and the road was basically taken from 2 to 1 lane, and then the other lane was dedicated to pedestrian and cycling use, there would be a ton of additional asphalt and concrete that could be torn up that over an extended period of time could be repatriated to grass, to a natural environment. And when we talk about things like, density, et cetera, the number of people that we can pack into a particular park area, it's only if we start to reclaim some of the area itself and put it to better use that we could maximize the space. I agree with residents. I mean, the fact is that the park was designed and was donated to the members of the community when the community was a fraction of 5,000 people, maybe less, as opposed to the 24,000, not including seasonal residents to date. And the park space, unless we do something, really broad and holistic and outside of the box, isn't going to continue to accommodate the growth, let alone the growth from outside of the area as well. And I think it's going to take some real bold, broad thinking to really think about our waterfront. I know that we've got an amazing waterfront master plan, but I think we're coming to that point in time, and COVID has really changed our perspective and our paradigm shifts in terms of how we're using our public spaces. And this is just a huge opportunity. So anyway, again, I get off my soapbox. Let's move on. I'd love to see this get passed tonight, kicked up to council, have a conversation about some of the things that have been put forward tonight, which are excellent suggestions. And I appreciate the CABO's report. I appreciate the fact that he's listened to the concerns of residents and is willing to make some adjustments. And I think that we've got a good plan as it relates to the summer of 2021 and an opportunity to really make it better in the years ahead. With that said, I'll get off the soapbox and run the risk of being thrown in the water. Have a good night.
Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to say anything before I have a few questions? Okay, so one matter I wanted to comment on was Princeton Shores. At the beginning of last summer, there was quite a bit of concern by the residents because of the numbers that were going to that park. And so I took it upon myself to go down there on a few weekends, including the Canada Day weekend, which I thought would be busier, just to have a look. And it wasn't overrun at those points. And I was easily able to get a spot one time in the lot and another time just on the street with 2 other cars. So before we restrict it to just residents, I'm wondering, and this is a question for CBO Miller, has there been any monitoring of that park and how busy it was last summer and what we can anticipate based on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. By law, we have not done any technical monitoring of that area. I know we did have engineering public works help us with traffic counter on the August long weekend, but to date we have not. I can consult with public works on that and get back to you. Okay,
thank you. I'm also in favor of a higher daily rate, and I appreciated Councillor Doherty throwing out the $10 an hour figure, which would seem to me to be a good amount. I see it, not only as making sure we're charging enough for our parking, but also based on what CBO Miller has said that, and I think I wrote it down correctly, that there were 2,400 hours of bylaw staff time monitoring all the people that came to the park last summer. And the costs of that would no way come close to what we'd be collecting in revenue for parking at $7. Probably we get a little closer at 10, but I do think through our parking revenue, I would like staff to give some thought if we're able to recoup at all those costs in addition to just the costs of the machines and so on. Those were the only comments I wanted to make in addition to those that our committees made tonight, which were good. Are there any particular motions that anyone would like to bring forward at this time? Yeah, Councillor Jeffrey.
Perhaps just an and that acknowledges the committee's input and that staff are taking it back to tweak for presentation to council.
Okay, I like that.
But that's Councillor, I almost made you Councillor Dahl. That's Deputy Councillor.
Before I turn it over to our Deputy Clerk, Deputy Mayor Hall, would you like to add something?
No, I was just prepared to second it.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, over to the legal person there, Deputy Clerk Dahl. What do you think we should do here?
I believe that would be an amendment to the original motion. So I think we have a mover, Councillor Jeffrey, and a seconder, Deputy Mayor Hall.
Okay, would there be any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay.
Sorry, Chair Hamlin, you have to vote on the main motion. That was an amendment, right?
Thank you for that. And so now we'll vote on the main motion. All in favor? And that's also unanimous. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the report tonight is the minutes of the Heritage Committee. And I understand that Jennifer McEwen is here and she wishes to address the committee briefly on this. Thank you.
That's correct, Madam Chair. Jennifer is in the audience and we just promoted her to speak, so she should be online just in a second.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. It's been an interesting meeting so far. This is a little bit lighter than what you've been talking about, but through the chair and on behalf of the Heritage Committee, I first would like to thank the council for the recommendation to refer our request to increase the Collingwood Heritage Tax Relief Program. Also, I would like to update you on some of the information that I had discussed at my presentation. And Councillor Hall, I believe you had a question which I have looked into, and I can give you a little bit better answer than last time. So I'll take us first to some of the information I'd given you on the Parthenon, which I had knowledge of from a documentary I had watched a few years ago. So this got my curiosity up, and I did some more research to find out where they're at right now and whether they've solved this puzzle. It's a 25-year-old property and was built, took them 8 years between 447 and 438 BC. And when I had watched this documentary, they'd already spent 35 years and still hadn't really come to understand how that it was built. And it's built with bulges and curves, which achieves sort of an optical correctness. And it's not just the columns, it's the entablatures and the floor. The tools apparently that they used had such precision that we can't even match them in today's world. Incredible. And apparently that also applies to the samurai swords. We can't build the tools that they were using to make these swords. Anyway, the Parthenon, it's estimated to take at least another 15 years. They're still debating on whether they're going to replace the whole thing or just build what's left, or renovate what's left. Now, another example of this lost knowledge with skills and the differences in tools would be like the pyramids. And of course, there's many more worldwide. But getting closer to home, although our buildings aren't quite as old, we do have architecture that is getting old as well. And over time for future generations, certainly will. Many of them were built before building codes, before having hydro, heat, air conditioning. And when people built them, they built them to last so that they could stand the test of time, be passed down through generations. Solid brick and the masonry, those skills are slowly disappearing. And they were built with a mindfulness for the way they place the buildings on a property, window placement, in consideration of the elements. So yeah, the craftsmen and their skills are disappearing. I suspect a lot of those buildings and houses that we have here will stand, that were built back then, will probably be around longer than some of the new houses that we're building today. And we can't afford to build them, like, especially if you look at something like the Federal Building downtown with all the marble and stained glass. We wouldn't be able to afford that in today's world. So anyway, that was just a little update on some of the info with that. So in answer to your question, Councillor Hull, in regards to the designation for Tay Township for land, I was a little unsatisfied with the way that I answered your question. So I did look into it to get more specific. Throughout the Ontario Act, the way that it's worded is and I'm giving you a Reader's Digest, it'll take too long to go through it all, but buildings, cemeteries, natural features, cultural landscapes, or features, ruins, archaeological and marine, archaeological and that have archaeological potential. So within that, then there's the Canadian Registry. They word it: a historic site is a structure, building, group of buildings, district, landscape, archaeological site, or other place in Canada that has been formally recognized, yada, yada, yada. So examples of that would be, I think you probably heard cemeteries. As far as Tay is concerned, it could also maybe apply to pieces of property where there was Indigenous. They might have tools and artifacts that are buried underneath, so they protect that. Another example would be Beausoleil Island, which is sort of off of the chute there, one of the islands in there. And that, let me just find my notes here on that. Apparently they have artifacts on that island that go back almost 7,000 years.
Ms. McKibben, your 5 minutes is up. I'm wondering if you could sum up your.
Okay, well, I'm almost done anyway. So
Thank you.
another example is a maple tree that they have down in Pelham Township. And then when you get into a worldwide thing, you have, as far as marine, it would be shipwrecks off the coast of Canada, Galapagos Islands, Easter Island, etc. So that gives you sort of a Reader's Digest of how land can play into heritage protection. And there's many, many more examples. Yukon, Klondike gold fields, etc. So yeah, so that's how you sort of tie in land. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer as well as I can for you, Councillor Hall.
Yes, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I don't have a question. I just I really appreciate the fact that the deputant remembered the question and was kind enough to take some time to further investigate. It's very kind of her to do so.
Well, I found it interesting too, and actually when I started going through it, it really makes sense. I just didn't quite know how to articulate it when you asked the question. So
no,
yes.
It's greatly appreciated. And for anyone who's in the process of maybe taking out a permit to build a deck out of wood, who knows, brick and marble may make a comeback based on the cost of lumber these days. So
holding those houses up, they didn't use 2x4s, you know. We would never be able to afford those trees now.
Yeah. Mayor Saunderson, Councillor Doherty, thank you. Does anyone want to raise any questions or have any comments about the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. All right, for the consent agenda, which is the next matter on the agenda, I'm going to read in what is before us, that the general consent is incorrect. 8.1, Township of Brock, Cannabis Licensing and Enforcement. 8.2, NVCA, Fisheries and Oceans Canada contributes to improving habitat for species at risk in the Nottawasaga Street. And there is a motion prepared for that. So could I?
And through you to Director Farr, just a quick question. Township of Brock's motion to the federal government, their legislation that for licensing of grow operations, that they be consistent with municipal bylaws and official plans. I'm just wondering, we only have one facility not constructed as of yet that would be producing cannabis, but have we encountered any issues with discord between federal laws and our local municipal legislation?
Director Farr.
Well, through you, Madam Chair, Councillor Doherty, this issue of the regulatory gap between municipalities and federal licensing of marijuana grow, officially sanctioned grow operations has proven problematic in many municipalities. Currently, there's a interim control bylaw in Clearview to deal with a proposed grow operation. So there is some gap in where they are emerging, and land use related issues have come up as a result. Some municipalities have elected to take that interim control bylaw approach to review how to deal with them.
Okay, thank you. Just a comment then that we would have a tool should the same kinds of issues present themselves to us here in Collingwood.
Yeah,
or at least one tool.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I mean, that is an option were an issue to arise. The question of location and operation of those facilities is something that we would consider to the extent that it's possible within the official plan and the zoning bylaw. And given the question and how prolific these issues are, I just flagged that for our official plan consultant to identify any options that would be available through that mechanism. Otherwise, they do present a unique set of issues, and it is a kind of new form of manufacturing / agriculture that in certain instances have proven a challenge for different municipalities. These are quite prolific, and where you hunt the internet for examples of problematic situations, you can find many examples of them.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Director Farr.
All right. Seeing no more discussion, then as part of this, for 200 Balsam, we have a specific motion for us to consider that staff's put forward, and it is that the request for redesignation of 200 Balsam Street be referred to staff for review in the official plan update. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that motion? Mayor Saunderson, Deputy Mayor Hall, and all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, the next item are departmental updates, and we have Peggy Slama down for 2 updates, but I believe Manager McGinnity, you're going to address those.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'll do my best. So the first one relates to street sweeping throughout town. So the Collingwood Climate Action Team is encouraging biking through their 30 Days of Biking Challenge for the month of April. And with an early spring, Public Works was able to get to the street sweeping a bit earlier and clear some of these bike lanes as part of that initiative. So bike lanes were started about 2 weeks ago, and they're working away through town as weather permits. As of today, the following have been swept: on 6th Street, Mountain Road, Hume Street, Raglan south of Hume, Ontario Street, Highway 26 West, and Dawson Drive. For other roadway sweeping, the downtown core section of Huron, Ontario was completed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, and the remainder of the core area will be completed closer to the end of the month, around the first week of May. Internal crews were geared up and ready to go this morning to commence the annual sweep, however, did not move forward because of the rain today. So with the forecast showing rain for the next few days, they're hopeful that it will be operational by Thursday. With that program, they'll plan to start here, Ontario, moving south from 5th Street towards Poplar while school is out, and then moving towards the 1st Street area. A contractor is also tentatively lined up to commence the residential streets the week of May 3rd. That's it for that item.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next one, are there any questions or comments from the committee? Councillor Doherty.
Yes, thank you. It's terrific that we are starting to get a leg up on our bike lane sweeping, especially with the April Cycling Month initiative. But I would like to ask, there is one roadway, Poplar Side Road, which is not within our jurisdiction, that has bike lanes, which very much need to be swept. Certainly the area between Huron, Ontario and the 6th line is pretty stony in areas. The area between High Street down to the 10th line is very bad, where there's actual couple of sand washouts so that the bike lane is completely obstructed. So through you, and I guess I can also leave this message with the Deputy Mayor and the Mayor to the county, if these lanes can be dealt with. And my second question is Beechwood is also very bad in places with stone and sand. And has this come into our jurisdiction yet, or is this where we have to send messaging to the province?
Manager McGinnity, could you answer that?
I can attempt. I believe I'm going to defer most of these questions to Public Works and ask to respond back following this meeting once I have clarification. But my understanding regarding Beechwood is that it is still an MTO road. And so any questions about that and maintenance on that road would be an MTO issue. So I can confirm that and pass on your questions about the maintenance for Poplar Side Road to our manager of Public Works as well.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no other questions on this, Manager McGinnity, would you like to proceed to your next item?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the next item is relating to the crosswalk on Huron. And with summer weather approaching, we've been receiving some questions on the timing of that crosswalk. So Manager Velick has informed us that the tender for the work will be released by the town this week. And that will follow with a bidding period of 4 weeks and then evaluation and mobilization. So we expect to see construction starting at the end of May, and it'll take about 4 weeks for it to be completed.
Okay, that's excellent.
Great.
Are there any questions or comments on that item from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for your update.
Madam Chair, I think Manager McGinnity has one more thing.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sorry, it's not on the agenda, but Peggy asked me to speak to the Red Cross bus and vaccination clinics. Mm-hmm. So she was hoping that we could advise council and members of the public that the Red Cross is providing free rides to vaccination clinics for anybody who is currently registered with the Red Cross or anyone who meets the criteria. So someone with a physical, mental health, or cognitive disability and who's unable to use conventional transit services. So they'll be using both their buses and our buses to do so. And the Red Cross is offering these rides free of charge as part of their pandemic relief efforts.
Oh, that's great news. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. Thank you very much.
Okay, on to the next item, which is public delegations. Would there be any this evening?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have Matthew Pretty wishing to speak.
Thank you. Go ahead, Matthew.
All right, there you go. Oh, just one.
Becky, can you hear my audio through the machine, the desk machine?
Yeah, you're good.
Can you?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm going to turn off the phone. Okay, Councillor or Chair Hamlin, good work manning this meeting, chairing this meeting. I really like how you allow people to expand. I would encourage you to run for mayor if you're interested in doing so, or maintaining as a councillor, because it's more of a team thing these days. But everyone, I want to address this whole visitors to the park issue. We need to remember Elvis Festival, and we did such a great job with Elvis Festival. Like, we had the street team. I remember Martin. It's such a loss that he had moved on, but he's got these funny videos of these golf course holes up at the golf course. Like, I'm sure he's doing great stuff up there, the retreat and golf course attraction at Duntroon. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to welcome the visitors and direct them. Right now with the COVID-19 scenario, everyone's being directed. Great plug there with the Red Cross, and registration is so important to pre-register. We could even do that with the town. You could give people options and say, hey, the Legion's available for parking, courthouse parking, where the location is in Sunset Point. You could send out memos to some degree with people through that hotspot app and let people know what's available and what's not available. See, open communication in the virtual world becomes a different thing, where if you give people a little bit of invitation, a little bit of options, then in real time, you're not going to waste time in real time with people, you know, at the park, getting lineups and all that kind of thing. But I think at the end of the day, what the residents are saying with regards to that is that parking lot in Deputy Mayor Hall, great idea about possibly redoing those parking lots or making it a grassed area. It's a very smart idea, and capitalizing on expansion is always a key factor. Bud Powell, he's smart when he says about that light. I think it should have been a traffic light. But anyways, because seasonal issues is always our main deal. It's the seasonal pressures and seasonal traffic. Now, I'm just going to use my time wisely here. Everyone's doing a great job. We need to connect with the newspaper more, Collingwood Today. Like the CAO had mentioned, the manner in which we could do updates to both simcoe.com and Collingwood Today. I saw Ian Adams today in front of Espresso Post. I went there. Starbucks isn't open till 11. Went over there, had a nice time, walked downtown. But again, the downtown is dangerous, guys. There's hardly anyone around. There's an element of danger right now with this COVID shutdown. Like, troops are being amassed on the Ukrainian border, the Arctic by Russia. Holy God, we just went through a presidency in America that was extremely not private, extremely public, and encouraging riotous behavior down the states. I feel so sorry for those people in the states that incurred those riots that happened. We need to be careful up here that we're not like pushing back, that we need to identify what we're up to up here. And yeah, high value properties, renovations, please increase affordable housing, attainable housing. We've got to maintain that. The hospital is good news, but ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, we need to give people options and then direct them. That would make a better vibe with the town. And that's another loss. The museum should take over the terminal building, by the way, set up a deal on the top floor. But anyways, the multi-use center, obviously downtown somewhere. But boys and girls, we need to hire people and pay people. The loss of employment right now is staggering. Like, it's amazing. It's actually, it's testing us. It's really testing the younger generation. If you're not a handyman and a tradesperson, good luck maintaining employment, because we're going into a deep level of poverty here. So when we think about multi-use center, we got to think about rentable spaces, indoor farmers market, maybe tie it into the Eddie Bush Memorial Arena on the backside, the Leisure Time Center, do an addition. But you know what? We got to think about the low man on the totem pole, how they can sell things. I don't even know if yard sales are legal this year.
Matthew,
boys and girls, and I think we need to direct people and hire people to share how we do things here and what we want to see. Please employ more people at the town during these seasonal up stages. Yep. Thank you for your time, and thank you for having me. Have a good evening and have a good season.
Thanks for your comments as usual. And then other business. Would any members of the committee, that be Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question that Executive Director Culver was going to answer this evening, but I think he's had to leave. So I'm going to ask my question anyway and ask that we maybe get an answer back. My question is it too late to pull the pin on straightening the secret trail, the east-west portion, which runs parallel to Huron Street on the north side? Because I'm walking there at least 5 out of 7 days, and I just think it's a huge loss for people to put that out beside the parkway, and with such fast traffic, it is really nice to have that one section just to escape it, and before you get to the wider sidewalk. So that was my question. He was prepared to answer this evening, but couldn't outlast us. So I'll just look forward to getting a response back when he has the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. That's a great question. I also have one question, and this is for Director Farr. So there has been some community discussion about the marketing efforts that are underway for the Harbour House development that Streetcar Developments is promoting for a spot near our waterfront. And the comments from the public have been concerns that they haven't seen any public process yet, and how many stories is this, and lots of different questions. And then it seems over the weekend, there's now an opportunity for people to sign up for a private sales event to buy units in this project. So really, I wanted to make sure our public who might be interested in units in that building would have an understanding of where this project is in terms of approvals by the town, so they don't get themselves into trouble. And so in particular, I was wondering, what kind of applications are outstanding for this project, and have there been any opportunities for the public yet? And if not, when do you see those coming forward?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. There are zoning bylaw amendment and site plan approval applications that have been filed by Streetcar Developments for this project. It's proposed as a 6-story, 130-unit condominium apartment building with ground floor commercial space. There will be a public meeting for this project. It's likely to come up in the next within the next couple of months, I would expect. The project is being reviewed right now by the town's kind of interdisciplinary team. It also includes the Conservation Authority, the county. And for information purposes now, we've also retained an urban design peer reviewer, and that peer reviewer is Brooke McElroy, which is the firm that was involved in the preparation of the waterfront master plan. So we're reviewing the file. We've had some meetings with the applicant, and the intent, like I say, is to bring the matter to a statutory public meeting. At this time, there's been a notification of the application to property owners within 120 meters. And as I say, we expect there to be further public engagement on this through that meeting and notification. So we'll look forward to hearing more from the public at that time and the applicant.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. All right, if there's no other business, we're on to the last item on the agenda, which is an adjournment. Thank you for moving that, Councillor Jeffrey. All in favor? No surprise, unanimous. Thank you everyone very much. And I'll say good night.